Afternoon, everybody. Hope everyone's having a great Thursday so far. Um, we're just waiting on some more people that are coming in as we speak. So we're going to get started in about a couple of minutes. So get settled in. It's going to be a very, very exciting and interesting conversation, I think. So looking forward to it. We're going to get started in just a couple of minutes. Okay, so welcome everyone to the Ulala webinar series. We're proud and excited today to have Becky Varian from Youngstown State University with us. We're going to be talking about how they've been implementing co-curricular assessment on their campus. It's going to be a very interesting conversation. I'm going to get into some of the methodology, some of the practices that they've undertaken, how that's worked out, some lessons, and some insights from that as well. So looking forward to a great conversation today. Before I get into introductions and just giving a high level about what we're going to be discussing, I want to get through a few housekeeping items. For one, recording and the recording and the slides will be sent after the webinar. It is recorded, so all of the audio, all of the questions will be there. If you have a fork in one hand and a pen in the other, you can feel free to put the pen down, enjoy your lunch, take part in the conversation, but by no means do you have to note down everything because we will be sending that out. I have also muted everyone that's participating, but please do chat in your questions at any time in the little chat box on the bottom right. I will present those to Becky and we'll be able to answer those as soon as we can. The one thing I do want to make sure we stress today that this is a participative exchange of ideas, and the idea is here that we want to have a conversation and discuss some of the subjects that we're talking about pertaining to assessment. This is by no means a singular just from us to you presentation, so I really hope that everyone does feel like they should participate and puts in questions, because I know Becky's excited to answer them as well. So just as a quick introduction, I just want to let you know about ourselves. We are Ulala Mobile. We've been partnered with Youngstown University and a host of others, about 200 institutions across North America and internationally, schools of all different types and sizes. Our goal really is to try and improve the student experience and help students succeed. And we do that through a mobile-first platform that's built around data and efficacy, but most importantly, it's built with the student experience in mind. And really, this is not a presentation about Ulala Mobile, so I'm going to pretty much skip over this part. Just to say, if you are interested in learning more about what we do and how we can help your institution, there will be information at the end of the presentation that you can use to connect with us. So what are we going to cover over the next 30 to 45 minutes? I'm going to quickly give an introduction about Becky, Youngstown, but then we're going to jump right into assessment within student affairs. We're going to look at the why, the how, the what. How are we trying to bring this very, very sort of complex subject into our daily work? What does it mean for actually developing the rubrics versus actually implementing those methodologies? We'll talk about some of that. We'll talk about some of the issues and the challenges associated with traditional methodology and trying to collect data from students, trying to collect data from programs. We look at how to fit assessment into the student experience. So what does that actually mean? How does that play out in practice? Talk about some of that. We'll obviously talk about the Youngstown success story, and Becky is going to answer a few questions about that. I'm sure you're all eager to know about. And then lastly, we'll try and look to the future also and think about like how can all of us as practitioners actually use this technology and use technology in general to actually improve assessment and student affairs. So first and foremost, I want to say thank you to Becky for taking the time today to have this conversation and be part of this webinar with us. So Becky, I know you have a very busy schedule, so from my side and from all of us, sincerely thank you for taking the time today. I want to just give a quick brief on Becky. She's the director for the Center of Student Progress at Youngstown State University. She got her bachelor's in psych from Kent State and is a proud, I'm sure, alumnus of YSU as well, where she got her master's in student affairs. And you know, if you want to reach out to her directly, you can reach out to her. I'm sure she'd be happy to answer any questions that go beyond this this presentation. So.
Sure.
The one thing, Becky, just to get started, I wanted to ask you, you know, what actually got you interested in student affairs, and today, what's keeping you interested in student affairs?
Wow, that is a really good question. Well, when I left undergrad, I always missed college. No matter what I was doing, I still missed campuses and the exchange of knowledge and wisdom that you find on campuses. So that's what led me back to get my degree in student affairs, and I did it after having several children, so I'm kind of, you know, I've been here 10 years, and it's definitely where you belong, where I belong. It feels good to be here.
Yeah, I think that's a very important thing that really separates our industry from so many others. I don't think I've met anyone really that, you know, isn't incredibly passionate about students and helping students. And that really sort of informs how we go about our day-to-day.
Absolutely, I agree with that.
Do you think having a family has sort of changed how you look at students as well? Do you feel like being a mother has sort of changed your outlook towards them?
I do. I have a lot, you know, I have a daughter with a learning disability, so working in a learning center, I have a tremendous amount of empathy for students who are intelligent but learn in a different way and need support, and it's my passion. So it's really a great feeling to use what I learned as a mother and to use my education both in what I do for a career.
Yeah, that's really, you know, powerful to be able to bring your personal experiences to inform your work as well. And I think people, you know, of all different sort of backgrounds and demographics sort of inform the space so well. I know for myself personally, as an international student a long time ago, that really informed how I approached fundraising in higher education. You know, for international students, finances were always a difficult sort of subject. So that's kind of how I got involved as well. So it's always interesting to hear how people's you know, personal life informs their professional life as well. So that's great. Talking about Youngstown State, so I'm going to give a quick brief on it, but Becky, I'm really going to have you talk to what makes Youngstown unique. So I know they're an urban research institution, obviously in Youngstown, founded in 1908 by the YMCA, and I really like this description of being kind of, I think of it as the Goldilocks school then, kind of not too big, not too small. How do you find, you know, your students relate to being at an institution of this size?
Well, you know, I think we all know in higher ed that fit is extremely important for a student. So a student that goes, you know, to a small school where they have, you know, 200 first-year students or 400, they're looking for something different. And students that come here mostly are commuter students who don't want to go into a lot of debt. They look at this university as a tremendous resource for them right in the area. So, and the size is nice because even if they come from a small high school, now here they're exposed to, you know, a freshman class of 2,000 students, which is a unique experience for those students as well.
Yeah, I think that that's a very important point, especially with the growing number of first generation college students and first generation post-secondary students. That transition from a high school experience to something entirely new, it's still something I think higher ed as an industry is working to get better at. So the idea that the size of the institution actually can go a long way in making them feel more comfortable, I think that's really, really powerful.
I agree.
So tell me something a little bit about the Penguins. I know you have 4 national football championships. What is the sort of affiliation with athletics on your campus?
Oh, wow, that is a very good question, because the coach that won those 4 national football championships is now the president of our university.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and that happened in 2013. He was also a coach at Ohio State, which anybody familiar with football has probably heard of the Ohio State Buckeyes. They're one of the top
Yes.
teams in the nation. So he came back to Youngstown. We had a job interview. We had a president, opening, and he was recruited to come here and interview for the president by the community. The community wanted him here because they view him as such a tremendous leader. So in football is very rich part of the culture in this area as well. So viewing him so positively and as such a good leader, and then they knew he had worked here for years and he had really taken nothing and made something out of it. They wanted him to come to Youngstown State and do that here. Now he's been here. We're going on 2 years now. So
wow.
It's interesting to see that on there, the National Football Championship, and how his leadership with that is now being extended into totally different role here, but he's been very effective.
Yeah, I was going to ask you, what makes what sort of makes Youngstown really, really unique, but I think you almost touched upon it there, the idea that the entire community is doing the interview process. I've never heard that before.
Wow, yeah. I would think most universities do that. That surprises me. Yeah, we do open forums, and we have several different, departments that their leaders and directors will come and meet with the person in the interview process. Now, it depends on the position, but, we all make recommendations. We have a survey gizmo sent out, and everybody gives their input, and then administration reviews that and makes the hiring decision.
Wow. Very, very interesting process. I kind of like it, actually. Cool. So now that we know a little bit about Youngstown, I want to turn the conversation actually to the audience and ask you guys about your institution. So we're going to do a quick poll just to get a sense of, who's in the audience today, and like what sort of best describes like your school type as well, so we can make sure that we tailor the conversation so that it's relevant to you as well. So you're going to see a quick poll come up. I'm going to launch it now, so you can feel free to actually fill it in. Just go in and select, and we'll kind of get a sense of who's actually attending today. So I'll give it a couple of seconds just to let people vote. And if you find none of those directly relate to you, that's okay too. Sometimes we have very, very unique, specific descriptions, and so just run out of space and trying to make a list. Okay, just going to give it another 10 seconds because we're almost through the entire population. Should see it on your screen. You can just click in there. Okay, so very interesting. Just going to show the results here so you guys can actually see. So we've got a lot of different types of institutions in attendance today. Some private liberal arts, smaller institutions, some medium-sized institutions, a few large public schools, community and technical colleges too, faith-based or other affiliation schools too. So very interesting. It's always nice to see a a diverse mix of people, and I think it really speaks to the kinds of people that are in this industry, and it's good to see diversity there. The other thing I kind of wanted to touch on was what kind of departments are we talking to today? So I'm just going to launch one more quick poll here, just to see, assessments or touches on so many different aspects. So just want to make sure that we understand kind of what hat we're looking from, or what office chair we're looking from here. So I'm going to give it another 10 seconds here, just to let people really get a personal, in-depth feel for what department they're representing today. Okay, so I'm just going to share this here. So naturally, I think just from the title as well, 68% are from student affairs, some from academic affairs, but also we have people from institutional research, IT, and from other departments as well. So, Becky, I want to get your take. How has assessment sort of changed, you find, in institutions over the past 5 years?
Well, we are actually approaching our Higher Learning Commission deadline, so our campus has been a buzz with assessment talk here for the past year and a half or so. We also have a very robust assessment office that does co-curricular and curricular assessment with departments. Okay. But I feel like I was very fortunate when I started my career in the Learning Center here, the Center for Student Progress. My supervisor, one of the things she taught me is being in a learning center, and I see a lot of our listeners are from the student affairs end, you have to do assessment. You are always proving yourself and that what you do matters for funding. Mm-hmm. So I see those two things tied closely together at a lot of places. So it's something that I've always done since I've been in this field.
Yeah, I think it's definitely been in the last sort of decade in academia in general, this real move towards accountability, transparency, and even KPIs, becoming very, very focused on outcomes. Do you find that it varies from school to school, or on school type, I should say, that like a large institution that's getting public funds versus like smaller private schools, that have reporting to donors or to a board of trustees?
I think that would be a really good question to ask our attendees today. Yeah. There's pressure from our state. We're a public school, so there's definitely pressure from our state to be outcomes-based. We have to have results, and they changed our funding formula from, full-time head count who's on your campus to what percentage of your students are you actually graduating. So that's right. Been a recent change in our state, in the state of Ohio, probably the past, 6 years.
Yeah, it seems like the move is going from just showing numbers to showing results,
I agree.
So looking at assessment, I think, we covered this a little bit in terms of the need for transparency. Excuse me. But I think there's probably so many reasons, and Becky, I want you to maybe just illuminate each of these a little bit, but I've put the cheetah and the little deer here, but the idea is like survival as student affairs. As a department, do you feel like this is critical to the department actually having a place at the table in an institution?
Yeah, I equate sometimes what we do, I consider us student affairs, although we do report to the provost. We're in the Division of Student Success, and I always say we're like the stepchild at the table, so mm-hmm. When you're invited to that table, you better know what you're talking about and have staff to get up.
Yeah. As the fourth of 5 children, I can relate to that on a very personal level. Yeah, and I think it also speaks to, being able to plan your events, plan your services, plan your curriculum. You know, how did you find like data is actually changing how you go about structuring your programs?
Well, we use it to drive our practice here at the center a lot. So we get student feedback, but we also look at outcomes of such as their grades. For
Right.
example, one of the things that we did early on when we started with academic coaching is let's compare the GPAs of students who we looked at their visit numbers. So students that came 11 or more times versus students that came less than 5 times and 6 to 10 times. And we have consistently seen that the more visits the students have, the higher their GPA. And we've been tracking that for several years. And
Right.
it looks like a step down. It's like steps. If these students are engaged in coming regularly for academic support, they're going to perform better. So
Right.
that's definitely made us really pressure the students in a good way to show them how important these appointments are, and that what we do with you will make a difference for you academically.
Yeah, and I think that speaks to the sort of the last part, which is, what is the actual quality of services and events and programs offered? Because if students were simply attending, but you weren't seeing those changes in their outcomes, that would force you to go back and rethink about what you're doing and what's being offered. So being able to measure that quality, I think, of outcomes is very, very important now.
Right. I'll give you another example what we did with planning. We have a multicultural coordinator in the office, and he runs a summer bridge program for minorities. And again, tracks, what's the retention, what are the GPAs look like of these students, and compare them to the general population at the university. Well, recently we were cited inside higher ed as being we were the bottom 5 for minority graduation rates, in particular African American graduation rates. So
Wow.
a lot of people panic when they see things like that, but what I tell my staff, this is an opportunity for us because we've got a program that works. And guess what? The provost then said, okay, I'm going to put some money into your summer bridge program. Let's grow it to 50 this year, 75 next year, 100 the next year. So we're
Nice.
planning now to grow that program, to bring in more staff to give support with that program. So we had the assessment in place, fortunately, because when the conversations happened, we were ready to go.
Yeah, I think that's so critical. It just goes back exactly what you said. As soon as you step up to the table, you have to have your plan and your data ready to demonstrate how you're going to change that. And I think numbers go a long way in terms of shedding light or shining a light, I should say, on things. But that's kind of just the first step, right? Then you have to do something about it. So
Absolutely.
yeah, that's very good to hear. I want to take a second and really just ask our audience, like, do people have any questions at this point? Is there something that you want to know in particular about what we've covered so far before we continue on? So if you have any questions, feel free to chat it in. There's a question section there, and I'm sure Becky's excited to answer some. So we'll just wait and see if anyone wants to chat in their questions. If not, then we will venture forward. Okay, so let's see. Well, we got a hello, which is nice to hear. Hello there. Thank you for your point. I don't think we have a question yet, but here's what we can do is anyone that has questions, feel free to chat them in, and we'll continue on. And as soon as I see some there, Becky, I can flag them up for you, and then we can address them as we go on. So, we talked a little bit about the why. Let's talk a bit about the how. One thing I've seen in student affairs is, particularly when it comes to assessment, there's a lot of still sort of formulation about the rubrics, the methodology, the rigor around how we go about this. Like, from what I understand, there's sort of a hierarchy by which, institutions can set their learning outcomes or their objectives, and then that kind of boils down by division, department, program, down to specific events and services. Is that something that you're seeing at YSU? Does it come from top down, or are you sort of building that internally and then that sort of trickles up?
I would say it has, I have to give credit to my predecessor. It was really built in internally.
Mm-hmm.
But now with the assessment office and new director, it does seem to be more robust, and there's more conversations coming from the provost and the assessment office about what they want to see.
Yeah, I think that's something that, there's institutions that have that have a bunch of programs and services in place, and it's a question of, can we tie these programs and services to the learning outcomes that we've identified, or do we start from scratch and redesign our services and programs to match the learning outcomes that we have? Do you find yours was one or the other?
I think we're data driven. We're actually student driven, we like to say, but data informed.
I like that.
I think it's a mix. I think initially like I said, my predecessor really saw the need to assess, being in student affairs side of things, being academic support, how crucial that was to having a place at the table. But at the same time, we're impacted, nationwide by what's going on with generations, with millennials when they came in. So we have to constantly look at that end of it too. What do our students need and want? And sometimes with assessment, we don't find out until after they're here for a little bit, right?
Right.
So it's a little tricky too.
Yeah, and what I heard recently, and I'm forgetting the source of this, but what was really interesting is to hear that this is the first generation where a technological advance has actually had two generations almost go head to head, because the newer generation actually knows more about a technology or about an advance than the previous generation. And so technology and like mobile communications and these sorts of platforms are really, really changing the way we collect information and talk to students. So we have a question here about how are you using the platform for assessment, and that's a great question. What I'm going to do is actually just say hold on tight, because we're going into that section next about how the platform actually works. So the idea here is, there's so many different ways to measure assessment. The rubrics are still being developed, but even the methodology, are you measuring satisfaction, outcomes, climates, needs? Are you benchmarking? Is it on the division? Is it on the department? I think what we wanted to talk about and what we're trying to do is really nail down, what is the issue here? And the issue is, students are looking for a quality experience. And as administrators, what we want to give is a quality of data. We want, as Becky, you were saying, we want like data-informed programming and services. So really the issue is like, what is that middle ground where we can get from students, like survey upon like survey, and have a few of them fill it out, and we get a lot of data, but what is the quality of that data? So what I want to ask is, how has this been, previously at your institution? How were you doing assessment before, and did you find that you sort of were able to match that intersection?
Okay, so we've implemented the service check-in feature with two of our major services that we offer. One is supplemental instruction. We led with that, and then the second one was academic coaching. And for both of those services previously, we were doing paper assessment. Here's a survey. Can you complete this? I mean, we also do the whole GPA thing. We look, so we have the indirect and the direct measures both. But from the student side, it was a survey once a semester. That was it.
Right, which I think is not atypical, right? I think most of most of the institutions we've spoken with, that's kind of almost standard operating procedure to send a survey at the end of the semester and kind of get the information in that way. I think one of the challenges that's always sort of been heard is that students actually don't love filling out those surveys, right? I mean, when we look at the average NESI response rate, it's under 30%. And when we think of it from our own side as administrators, I think we can all relate to an inbox, probably even a bit bigger than that. So, Becky, did you find like the challenges associated with sending those surveys? Was it, response rates? Was it accuracy of data?
Response rate is always an issue, but why we did paper, to tell you the truth, is because we're standing in front of them, handing it to them to get a better response rate. Right. Because once you send the survey out, it's much less likely you're going to get a response. So, the tried and true paper survey, and the coaches would say, okay, I need you to do this today before you leave my office. I'm going to step out. So we had a pretty good response rate that way. The feedback from the SI sessions did, they would end the session a little bit early and kind of had a captive audience there. So the response rate wasn't too bad. Mm-hmm. But when I look at what we're getting now weekly, and even with academic coaches weekly, SI leaders hold 3 sessions a week, so they might be getting feedback 3 times a week from their sessions. So that's been nice, that on-time, response to what am I doing as an SI leader? Is it working? And they're getting that immediately. So that's been nice.
Yeah, I think you touched on a really important point there. The difference between sending something at the end of the semester when they've stepped away from the experience and the state of mind versus getting something real time, getting something immediate that speaks to the experience they had at that moment. I think that's a very important distinction, as well as obviously the matter of it can really leave a poor sort of taste for a student to have to fill out like a 10-page survey or like a 200-question survey, because the truth is they're not just necessarily getting surveys from one department. I remember not too long ago when I was a student, every class that you'd sit in, you'd fill out an end of semester survey. And then if you add on top of that the department or workshops or services also sending surveys, if you layer all of that in, like it gets to, that inbox might look like a student's inbox too.
Yeah, that's right. That's why they have a 29% response rate for the NESI, I guess.
Survey fatigue is very real. And so you mentioned you implemented the service check-in feature and the assessment feature for your supplemental instruction. I want to take a quick second to talk about that. So one of the things that we've been trying to do is framing the methodology for providing feedback into the student experience. So the idea is you can create an event on your dashboard. You enable event attendance there or service attendance and check-in there, and that's just the first step. So what happens is students, and I just want to take a second here so that people understand exactly what it is you guys implemented there. So students are able to check in, whether it's like their career day or they're at a counselor. Becky, as you said, you guys have implemented it for supplemental instruction over at YSU, so students can simply scan in, and at the end of the experience, they get a little notification, much like they do in Uber and Yelp and pretty much every other sort of app that they use nowadays, and they just give their 5-star rating and some qualitative feedback. And what's really great is you can actually tailor the question that gets asked. So anything from, did you enjoy this experience, to what did you learn from this? And that gets push notified to them on their device. And then for the administrator, it's a nice little dashboard view. You can see exactly what it looks like, and the collection of all the feedback that's there. So, Becky, I wanted to ask you, how did you find this process? Implementing a new technology is always sort of, a hairy subject, I think. So talk to me about that. Like, what was it like, going to your supervisors, going to your staff and saying we're going to be implementing this kind of rating system and this kind of technology?
I think you're always going to get mixed bag, but when they saw how easy it was, they just got each person got their own, quick response code, and the
Hmm.
students scanned when they came in, and so we did those training sessions beforehand, and that pretty much put everyone's mind at ease. Um, the bigger problems lately has been getting people to remember to do it.
Right.
Um, I guess that's ongoing with technology, and if you don't have, but the students sometimes are coming in and say, "Am I supposed to scan in today?" So that's been good too,
That's
because
good to hear. I think they're on it.
yeah, but the implementation of this compared to other things I've done, I thought was really simple.
Well, that's good to hear. I think, what you touched upon there with students also is I think it's so important that they feel like they have a voice on campus, right? And even if a student doesn't necessarily have the greatest experience, the ability to give their feedback or to voice their opinion on how it can be improved, do you find that that's important for them?
I think it's more than important. I think it's crucial for this generation. I mean, they're used
Right.
to. I had this conversation with my son last night because he has an interview with a startup about rating doctors, and I said, I rely on Yelp. I'm not a millennial, but when I am traveling, I go to Yelp to find out where should I eat, what salon should I visit.
Yeah.
So it's built in even more. It's part of who they are as I
Yeah.
think as a generation. It's just they have that expectation, and I talk to my staff. Imagine what higher ed's going to be like in 20 years when the millennials are running our campuses. It's gonna look very, very different, and they do expect to have a say, and they should.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a very, very insightful sort of look at it, even like down the road, when they are, and we see this sort of at conferences, when you meet the next generation of student affairs professionals, they relate to this immediately. Um, but the challenge is always, with new technology is you have processes in place also, that require updating or that require changing. Um, so administratively, did you find that that was, an easy sort of sell within your organization, within the department as well?
Yeah, I mean the check-in and the scan-in. For example, at our SI sessions, sometimes we'll have 50 or 60 students at an SI session, and they were signing in on an attendance sheet. Now
Right.
we have the codes in different spots in the room, and the students will just go in and quickly scan in. Now, one of the little hiccups we run into is if their app's not updated,
Right.
or and then they keep getting asked to rate the session. But so we have to remind them, update your app when we get updates. Some of them don't have smartphones, believe it or not, and so we have to do a manual check-in with those.
Right.
But once it becomes part of the process, as the semester's gone on, we've not had any complaints. Initially, you're always going to have that. What am I supposed to do? This is new.
Right.
The manual check-in versus the scan-in. But once you get into it, it was pretty simple.
Yeah, and I think you raise a very, very important point there is that, there's always this adoption curve. Um, and the important thing is not abandoning things sort of early on the curve, because once students reach that tipping point, it becomes second nature, and it's kind of like riding a bicycle, and you almost expect it to happen. Um, so that's a very important point there. So we've got a quick question here. Um, so there's a question here from someone saying, what sort of app do you use for this? So I can answer that very briefly, but the app actually comes for the institution in partnership with Ulala. So we actually build the app for the institution. We work with our institutional partners to build a branded app for them. That becomes like the official campus app that they can then use not just for students checking in and assessment, but students really use that campus app for all sorts of things, finding events, talking to one another, booking study rooms, all sorts of things like that. Becky, do you find like the students sort of use the app as well, outside of just doing assessment? Is that part of how they experience college now because that's how they experience everything else?
Yeah, I keep an eye on our campus wall, and something happened over the weekend really made my heart happy. A student actually took a picture of a math problem that she was working on and just said help. And like 4 students responded to her, and there was a discussion about how to work out the problem. So me as academic support, that made me really, really happy. But there's a lot of different things that go on that campus wall, and the students are very engaged with that. So that's actually the most used feature for us in the app. And then second would be the service check-ins that we've used. It's like I said, we were doing paper check-ins, and now we're going to be integrating Ooh La La with our banner system. So when the students scan in, we're going to have a ready-made attendance sheets with their banner numbers on it and be able to see, who attended what sessions. It's going to be much more accurate and easy, a lot less manual work going on. So I'd say those 2 features for us are the most used features.
Excellent. No, that's great. And I think, what you just said there is so important. For us, the idea is, the app is really fundamentally a communication tool for students to communicate with their administrators, with their institution, and most importantly, with each other. Outside of these prototypical social media platforms that are, have a lot of distractions there, it's nice to be in an academic mindset, in your institutional mindset, and be able to communicate with your peers that way. I really wish I had something like this when I was in school, because yeah, there were some calculus problems I could have used a campus wall in my day.
Yeah, I thought that was really cool to see that.
Yeah, I like that. I like that a lot. Very ingenuitive. So I guess what I did want to talk about also is, as far as your staff goes, were there any concerns about, people actually rating the service or rating the staff member? Was that something that you had to deal with?
Not initially. I didn't get much pushback at all, but then one of the staff members I think she got a 3-star rating, and she considers herself, and she is a very good academic coach, but we could go in and see which student rated her lower, and then she had a discussion with that student the next week, what can I do to improve?
Right.
The result really was, I like that because it put her on her toes, number one. I think we can all get to that point where, you think you're good at your job and you just kind of do it in a routine way. Well, it just took her right out of that routine. Right. And she had a discussion with the student, and the student and her have a much better relationship as a result, because there was an honest exchange about why she didn't get a 5-star rating, right?
And honestly, that warms my heart to a level I can't even explain, because fundamentally, like, it is about like that personal relationship, right? For her to be able to talk to her student and really like understand, how can I help you better? It's not at all about the 3-star, 4-star, 5-star at that point. It's about the relationship with that individual and trying to help, a single student at a time succeed. So I love that story, and I think you should be proud of your staff for sure.
Absolutely, that she was honest enough to share that concern with me. But then, on the flip side, I have another academic coach who's fairly new, started in October, and her students have really responded, and I've got a lot of, they answered the questions, which was my concern. I don't like just the rating, because I want some qualitative comments. I want to hear that, and she's got a lot of comments, and literally just sat here reading the comments that her students wrote, and was just overwhelmed with what a good job she's doing. I mean, they were very specific about what she did that was helping them, and one student said, I don't think I would have made it through the semester had she not shown me how to do X, Y, and Z. So, we've had that positive side too. With the SI leaders, now you've got millennials rating other millennials, and that's a different side to it, because not everybody's getting a trophy all of a sudden, and they had one SI leader again who got some negative feedback, and it was very difficult for her to hear, and her supervisor did an excellent job of talking her through that. So it's just one session, it's 2 people that rated you, and these were their issues. They kind of did give constructive feedback. It wasn't, it wasn't like, oh, you just stink. It wasn't like that. It was like, I need you to be more patient with me when you're explaining. It was a chemistry one. So there's honestly, there's that part to it, and they need a good supervisor, the SI leaders, to be able to sit down and talk them through that. Look, this is not the end of the world. You did get some negative feedback, but let's talk about what we can do. And then the next session, those same students rated her 5-star. But honestly, it was hard for her to work through that. There were tears involved.
I think it's so when you take a step back and you think about it, it's actually improving not just the person on the ground that's talking to the students, but also it's improving the manager to be able to then navigate that and actually improve their staff members' performance, and how they deal with that kind of millennial versus non-millennial divide in their staff. So that's a really, really interesting example.
Yeah.
There's a question here on did you have any concern or feedback that the students might not be as honest because they're not anonymous?
I haven't seen that in the feedback, although the ratings are like 4.7 and 4.8 out of 5 stars. But in the comments, I haven't seen that really. I think the students liked having that tool at their disposal. They're not going to. I don't know that they know that the coach can't see it. I don't know that we've told them that the coach can see their name. So
yeah, they might even think they are anonymous. Well, the truth is,
I don't know, because we haven't told them that intentionally.
Right. Well, the thing is, one thing that we did realize, from having anonymous sort of conversations, it actually prevents people from being held accountable sometimes for their words. And we see this a lot on social media, especially, right, where people can really just call out and say whatever they want without fear of any accountability or reproach for their words. And really owning your feedback, if it is constructive and criticism, if it is constructive criticism, to be able to own that and say, listen, this is how I feel, and I feel like I could have had a better experience, and I'd like to help improve this. I think tying that back to the person that said it is a really important way to then improve the process, because if it was anonymous, there'd be no way to really talk to that student. And that example you gave, where she then sat down with the student and figured out how to really help them, that wouldn't have been possible.
Yeah, that's a good point. I mean, I look at our campus wall. I was on Yik Yak for a while, and I had to get off because it was so negative and so nasty. Yeah. I didn't want that in my head all day. But yeah, where they have to, for the campus wall, they have to have, there's accountability because you can see their name. So that's right. A good. You're right.
Yeah. Yeah, and for what you've talked about in terms of your staff, I wanted to make sure everyone knows the success that your staff has had in implementing this, and how amazing that they've been in the service provision as well. So you said maybe 3 scans a week. I mean, we're seeing over 80 scans a day for services across all of them. There's an average rating of 4.7 over 5. And we looked at that NESI response rate back in the earlier slide. It was 29%. What's amazing is that you're getting 71 plus, depending on certain services. It goes even higher. So I want to ask you, how has this success sort of been translated for you? How have you used these numbers? How have you used the success?
Well, I gave you a few micro examples, as they came up, because the one thing I do know is everybody that's being rated is checking their ratings. I mean, they do that almost on a daily basis, so they're very aware and invested in that. This is our last week of the semester, so we're in the process now. The other nice thing I like is I can download those ratings and compile that data and really get a look at what is it telling us as far as the open-ended question. Our overall rating, at a quick glance, you can say, yeah, our staff's doing a good job. I like to get a little deeper than that, though. What are we doing a good job at? So to me, that's one of the downfalls of just the one question, and I still feel like, I need to ask them more questions on the survey at the end of the semester. But I still like the I would like to combine the two, to tell you the truth, because I
I
need
think
more. I always
I
more.
think I think that's the case of the you know, that's the two circles we showed before, just creeping one of them a little further onto the other. Because the truth is, I think you're right, and I think moving in that direction is very, very important and becoming more nuanced in what we ask and how we're able to do that. So right now there is just one question that we're able to ask, but I think as we create the culture and the mindset that, you know, students expect to give feedback this way, then I think it becomes easier and more palatable for them, you know, to answer two questions instead of one, or answer more questions over time, like maybe doing multiple micro surveys over the course of the week, right? So there's ways of getting more information that we can sort of build in further. But I think what's really, really interesting is the fact that this is creating changes in the way that staff is being managed, in the way that students are interacting with their administrators. And I really like what you talked about in terms of it's not just about the average rating. So this is kind of like an illustration of what that dashboard looks like. And like you said, like you like going into the service provider and seeing, you know, what was the rating for each visit, or what were the comments for each visit, right?
Yeah, I actually filter by ones that commented and read the
Yeah.
comments. So I'm really glad you have the download feature. Yeah, so I like to read the comments. It tells you a lot, and I do wish we could make more students answer the open-ended question.
Yeah.
They like, you know, quick. They want things to be quick, quick, quick. That's another thing about the technology generations is it's a quick thing. I'm not spending a lot of time on this. So sometimes you just feel like you need more information than you get from a rating. But still, when other students look at that rating, they can use that as a marketing tool. You know, I'm an SI leader with a 5-star rating.
Absolutely. Oh my God, absolutely. I think that's so interesting. The idea of doing, you know, like even giving prizes for like, you know, the highest rating this month or most improved rating. There's so many ways to really motivate people with it. And, you know, I can see the way, you know, we've seen this in a few places where people proudly, excuse me, people will wear a badge that kind of shows like, you know, I'm a 5-star employee. Um, it's really, really nice.
Yeah, they like their ratings. They're stars for sure.
That's really good to hear. Um, yeah, so you know, moving on, I know we don't have a lot of time left. We're approaching sort of the last 10 minutes. So I did want to jump back into the questions here. There was a question that pertained to, I'm just going to see the question here. Um, you know, how do you assess soft skills acquired by students through activities associated with leadership or diversity? So I guess the question here is kind of asking, how are you attributing, you know, the learning outcomes to some of these activities? And it kind of goes back, I think, to that earlier question of, you know, how are you assigning the learning outcomes to these activities that are taking place with these services? You know, irrespective, I guess, of the technology of how you capture that information, but how do you go about actually ascribing it?
You know, when the students give the feedback, we can have those one-on-one conversations immediately, but I think the assessment has to go deeper than just the stars, for sure.
Right.
We look at, like I said before, we look at GPA. We do, this past year, we implemented mindset as a piece of what we do with students. So, you know, you've got your cognitive and your non-cognitive, and we wanted to know, you know, how do we motivate students? And growth mindset by Carol Dweck is actually motivational theory. So we've done a lot of that too. We're doing assessment that way. I'm not sure if I'm answering the question, but that's another piece that we look at with students is in the big picture. So we look at their GPA, we look at their feedback, and then we look at this non-cognitive variable to see if it relates to those things as well. And the mindset is actually, there's a quiz that Carol Dweck developed to go with that, and we do you know, a quiz at the beginning of the semester, and then we do a post assessment at the end of the semester to see if there's been growth that way.
I think that's a really interesting point because, you know, as you mentioned, like while the functionality right now is associated with being able to get like a quantitative rating and asking a qualitative question that could be, you know, a specific learning outcome focused question or a more general one. I think what's interesting here is what you mentioned in terms of like attributing the GPA along with the assessment piece. So when you integrate sort of banner and services like that, now you're able to see, if you integrate your SIS, for example, you're able to see specifically when a student checks in what their GPA is at the time of their first check-in. You can attribute their GPA at the end of the semester, let's say on their last check-in, and then be able to do like more in-depth surveys, like you said, maybe multiple questions, maybe more in-depth questions there. So this is kind of, I think, the way I see it is very much as the first layer and sort of building that technology piece there as a bridge, and then really trying to scale that over time. But I think what is really important is always being aware of how we're affecting the student experience at the same time. You know, because every marginal gain we get in quality of data, are we getting that at a marginal expense to the student?
I'm not sure what you mean by that. Like, are they getting tired of getting surveyed?
Yeah, so like every time we ask an additional question, right? Like it's an additional question that they have to answer, or every time we ask a question, it's another time they have to answer. And so I think it's just about finding that balance between being able to assess programs effectively, and students still feeling engaged enough to want to answer all of those questions, right?
There's absolutely a line that we can cross. I totally agree with that. And even some of the SI leaders, like, can we do 2 sessions a week instead of 3? But the content that they deliver is different in every session,
Right.
so it doesn't make sense. The coaches have it easier because it's only once a week. But yeah, I think we can overdo it, and they'll just be, okay, I'm clicking 5 stars and I'm out of here, you know, just to get this on my screen. We have to monitor that, and we have to listen to what they're telling us about that as well.
Yeah, I think that's the key, is like is adapting as you know, we become more nuanced, but we also try to make sure that we watch for those pitfalls. So I am cognizant of time, so I'm going to give a quick recap here, just some stuff that we covered today. You know, we looked at why this is important, how traditionally this sort of takes place in terms of assessment, student affairs, and then, you know, what some of the methodologies are, the challenges with doing surveys, and student feedback rates and survey fatigue. And then, you know, how we're trying to frame assessment or the methodology for assessment within the student experience, how successful YSU and Becky, your team, has been at doing that, being able to coach students, and you know, data at the highest level and seeing the ratings and the stars is all very good, but I think those anecdotal stories of students and their coaches really having a one-on-one relationship that improves the experience and improves the success rate, that's just really the end game for all of us, right? So I want to just quickly, you know, put up the information in case someone wants to get more information. You know, you can reach out to us. Our consultants will be happy to take your call. If you can send an email or schedule a consult on our website. But I did want to take this time to say thank you, Becky, to you for honestly, like, sharing your insight, sharing your expertise, and really taking, you know, so much time out of your day. So thank you very much. Very appreciated. Thank you to everyone that you know, sat through the session. I hope you enjoyed it. We have a couple of minutes left, so Becky, if you don't mind sticking around for a couple of minutes in case people have questions.
Okay.
So if anyone has questions now, this is still a good time to ask them. We can get those in. If not, you know, you feel free to email them in to us, and I'm sure over time, like, I can nag Becky to answer some of them then as well.
Yeah,
so
I'm great with email. Phone's not so good. Email's perfect.
For sure. And like I said, we'll be sharing the slides and the recording as well, so you'll get Becky's information there. I'm sure she'll be happy to answer any questions you have then. So I'm not seeing any questions come through immediately. I think most people kind of go on to the next part of their day, so I'll make sure that we sort of end on time here and make sure everyone has their next meeting start on time. So Becky, thank you so much. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Looking
Appreciate
forward,
it too.
yeah, looking forward to chatting again soon. And thank you everyone for attending. And have a great afternoon.
You too. Bye-bye.
Take care. Bye now.